Hello, today is the second lecture of Fundamentals of Music, Course 1. And today we are going to learn about different concepts that we learn in Indian classical music. I'm going to share the list of concepts that we are going to learn today in the class. Okay, so it is Nada, Shruti, Raga, Tala, That, Alankar, Gamak, Kanaswar or Sparshaswar, Murki, Khatka, and Meend. So we are going to learn about these concepts. These are very widely used concepts when we discuss about Indian classical music. So what is Naad? The first concept that we are going to discuss today. The first term Naad is a Sanskrit word which means musical sound. Naad is a combination of life or breath and fire or energy. Like we discussed about Naad yesterday very briefly. Naad is just one step before Swar. Okay, so Swars are basically Nadas, and Naad are formed from Dhwani. So not all the Dhwanis are Naad and not all the Nads are Swar. When there is a combination of breath and energy, Naad or musical sound is produced. In other words, when breath is energized, it gives rise to musical sound or Naad. Thus, sound is produced by motion of some kind in the air, or any energetic action in the air causes sound. In fact, sound is a sensation caused by certain oscillatory motions of the particles of a body. Some sounds are melodious and some sounds are harsh and very unpleasant to hear. We do not like to hear them. But in every case, the source of sound is in a state of vibration. If you closely watch anything which emits sound, you will observe a sort of vibration in it, and along with it, the sound. If you've ever played sound on a very high volume on a speaker, you will see that the speaker actually vibrates when any kind of sound is played on a high volume. Why is that? That is because there is vibration, and with it comes the sound. So sound is always in a form of vibration. When the volume is low, then also there is vibration, but you will not be able to see it visually because those are very subtle, those are very minute, those cannot be really caught by human eye, but the vibrations are there then also. If you closely watch anything which emits sound, you will observe a sort of vibration in it, and along with it comes the sound. If you just pluck the string of sitar or tanpura, both of these are musical instruments. If you pluck both these instruments with your finger, it will emit sound. On close observation, the string will appear to vibrate. It vibrates. If you again touch the vibrating string with your finger, the vibration will stop, and along with it, the sound will also sees. So if you pluck a string of a sitar or a tanpura, it will vibrate and produce sound. And if you stop the string with your finger, the sound will also stop. Thus, it is very clear that vibration is the cause of a sound. Unless it vibrates, unless the string vibrates, some waves, there are waves which vibrate, there can be no production of sound. These vibrations continue one after the other for some time and stop after a while. When such vibrations are uniform, they are called regular vibrations. But when such vibrations are fitting, alternately fast and slow, they are called irregular vibrations. So when there are irregular vibrations, the sound also can go up and can go low. So the volume of the sound increases or decreases depending on how regular the vibrations or how irregular the vibrations are. Then again, these vibrations last up to a stated interval of time, and sometimes these vibrations suddenly stop. When these vibrations last for a stated interval of time, they are called non-periodic vibrations. Now, the sound that is produced by regular and periodic vibrations is called unmusical sound or noise. Okay, so when there are irregular vibrations, then that is usually called as unmusical sound or noise. The noise that we hear outside, anywhere, or there are some unmusical sounds like we discussed in the last class, that not all sounds are musical, some are non-musical. So those which are non-musical are are called as noise, have irregular vibrations, but the musical sounds have regular vibrations. In other words, a musical sound is produced by regular and continuous vibrations of a body, but an unmusical sound or noise is produced by irregular and discontinuous vibrations of a body. Therefore, it can be said that a musical note is the result of a regular and periodic vibrations of the air particles acting in the air, and therefore also of the body, whence they proceed, each particle passing through the same phase at stated intervals of time. On the other hand, the motion to which noise is due is irregular and fitting, and alternately fast and slow, creating in the mind a bewildering and confusing effect of a more or less unpleasant character. In other words, musical sound is produced by regular and periodic vibrations. So they are periodic. Periodic means they happen, they come into existence after certain periods, regular periods, and they are also regular, like regular periodic time vibrations. It produces continuous and pleasing sensation on the ear. While noise is a result of irregular and non-periodic vibrations, it is a confused mixture of many discordant sounds. It creates in the mind a bewildering and confusing effect of an unpleasant character. So sounds now can be divided into two categories, like we discussed briefly in the last class also. Musical sound is one type, which is also called the nada, and another is the unmusical sound, which is also called as the noise. So let's see about what is musical sound or nad. It is that sound which is produced by regular and periodic vibrations and which gives a pleasant sensation on the ear, and it is called musical sound or the nad. It has a very important quality of being pleasant to the ears. It has to sound nice, otherwise it cannot be called a nad. For example, the sound of sitar or violin or tuning forks or sonometer, etc. Many other musical instruments. The sound of all these is extremely pleasing to the ears. Another type is unmusical sound or noise. It is that sound which is produced by irregular and non-periodic vibrations and which gives an unpleasant sensation on the ear. This is called unmusical sound or noise. So we cannot listen to unmusical sound, we cannot listen to noise for a very long time. For example, the sound produced by gunshots or by the hoofing of a running horse is not very pleasant to the ears. We cannot listen to it for a very long time. A few minutes is fine, but we cannot listen to it for hours. We might just escape that noise or turn off that noise for if it is possible, or just go away from that noise and listen to something very pleasing to the ears. Since music is concerned with sound, therefore we are interested in that kind of sound alone, which is capable of being used in music. That is musical sound or nad. Unmusical sound or noise has no bearing with music. Okay, so in music, when we talk about sound, we are going to talk only about the nad. We are going to talk only about the musical sound and not the unmusical sound or noise. It has no placing, it has no bearing, it has no standing in the field of music. Now, musical sounds have also been divided into two groups. One is anahat nad and one is ahat nad. So what is anahat nad? Anahat nad is a sound without any earthly cause and which is considered to have existed from all eternity after the following manner. So when a man closes the orifices of his ears with his fingers, he perceives an inward noise to which they gave this name. So when you do this, when you close your ears with your fingers, if you listen to it very carefully, you will hear an inward noise which is happening inside and which you can hear, which is called the anahat, which is there but which you cannot hear unless you make an effort. Unless you listen to it very carefully, you will not be able to hear it. So that is called anahat nad. There are many such sounds around us which we are not able to hear, and some of which we are able to hear only if we make an extra effort. And there are still many more such sounds which are out of musical sounds, which are there, which we cannot hear because of the frequency. They're either very low frequency or very high frequency. Then comes the ahatanad. Now, ahatanad is a sound which proceeds from a cause which, like speech, they consider to be an accident of air occasioned by percussion. Musical sounds in general exhibit three different qualities. Loudness or intensity is the first quality of musical sound. Second is the pitch, and the third quality of musical sound is the timbre. So these three qualities are very important. How is nad defined? Nad has to have an intensity, it has to have a pitch, and it will also have a timbre. If there is one of these three things missing, then it cannot be called as nad. Now, what is the intensity of nad? So, intensity or loudness of sound is also known as the magnitude of sound. Everybody is familiar with the difference between a loud and a feeble sound. Loud is loud sound, feeble is a weak sound. Intensity of sound depends upon the greater of less energy by which the sound is produced. If the stretched wire of a sitar is plucked lightly, it will produce less intense sound which will be audible to the persons sitting close by. But if the same stretched wire is plucked forcibly, the sound will be intensive enough to be heard at a long distance. So it is the same string of the same instrument. If it is plucked lightly, then the formation of sound will be low. The volume, the intensity of that sound that is produced by plucking this string will be low. But if you pluck it forcibly, then the sound that is produced will be of greater intensity. If the same stretched wire is plucked forcibly, the sound will be intensive enough to be heard at a long distance. The same sound can be heard from a very close distance or a very long distance depending on how forcibly it is struck. And it also means that how forcibly it is struck will identify its intensity by which the sound will be heard. Again, when a drum is struck violently, the sound is louder than when it is struck slowly. Soft and loud sound can also be produced from our throats, isn't it? If a person pronounces softly the note sa of the middle octave, it will be audible only to the people sitting close to him or her. But if he pronounces the same sa loudly, it will be heard even by the people sitting at a long distance, isn't it? Sa will be heard, if I sing in this volume, will be heard probably only by 2-3 people sitting in this room. Sa. And if I sing the same swar, same frequency, sa, then probably people sitting in the neighboring rooms will also be able to hear. That is the difference. So I'm putting more pressure, putting more force in singing the sa the second time, which also means that it is more intense. And the first time it is less intense, and that is why the output is also low. Thus, the intensity or magnitude of sound indicates that the sound which is being produced is soft or loud. Now, the second important quality of sound is the pitch. It is the property by which a note of higher pitch is distinguished from that of a lower pitch. If a person pronounces sa re ga with 3 notes one after the other, it will indicate that the sound of re is lower than the sound of ga, and the sound of sa is lower than the sound of ga, and the sound of sa is lower than the sound of re. Thus, a higher note is said to be of high pitch, and a lower note is said to be of low pitch. For example, sa re ga. In this, sa is the lowest in the pitch in these three notes. Re is higher than sa. Sa re. Re is more frequency, is a higher frequency than sa. Ga, ga is higher than sa and re both. So it is even higher frequency than re. The pitch of a sound depends upon the rapidity of vibrations of frequency of the sound per second. The higher the frequency, like I'm going to ga, sa, re, ga. Ga has the maximum vibrations in a second. That is why it is higher swar or higher pitch. The pitch of a note is higher or lower in proportion to the number of vibrations or frequencies. The higher is the pitch of sound and the lesser is the number of vibrations or frequencies. The lower is the pitch of sound. So the pitch of the note is higher or lower in proportion to the number of vibrations. Higher the vibrations, higher the pitch. And lower the vibrations, lesser the vibrations, lower is the pitch. Okay. For example, the frequencies of pa are greater than the frequencies of sa. Sa, pa. Pa is higher than sa. Pa has more vibrations than sa. That's how the pitch is also higher. Therefore, the pitch of pa is higher than the swar sa. Again, the frequencies of ma are lesser than the frequencies of pa. Again, the frequencies of ma are lesser than the frequencies of pa. Therefore, the pitch of the sound of ma is lower than the sound of pa. Ma, pa, ma, pa. Pa is higher than ma because there are more number of vibrations in pa than in ma. Therefore, the pitch of the sound of ma is lower than the sound of pa. Therefore, we can conclude that the pitch of sound indicates that the sound which is being produced is high or low. So it is directly in proportion with the number of vibrations, or higher the vibrations, higher the pitch. Lower the vibrations, lower is the pitch. Now we come to another important point. The second important point is the timbre. Third important point is the timbre of sound. What is a timbre? So timbre is a French word which means the characteristic quality of sounds produced by each particular voice or instrument. The German word for timbre is Klangfarbe. So klang means musical sound and Farbe means color or quality. Timbre is the property of sound by virtue of which the sounds of different instruments can be distinguished one from the other, or the voice of one man can be recognized from that of another man. Now, when we have when there is a song being played on radio by, say, Lata Mangeshkar, one would immediately recognize, even without not seeing the face of the artist, that Lata Mangeshkar is singing, or Kishore Kumar is singing, or Mohammad Rafi is singing, or Pandit Bhimsen Joshi is singing, or Amitabh Bachchan is speaking. Why is that? Even if we don't look at the face, we are able to identify the voice. Even if it's the same line given to each artist, we can still recognize who's speaking. Why is that? That is because the quality of timbre, which is very, very important. It is a very important property of sound, because of which we can distinguish one sound, one voice of a person from another voice of another person. The property of timbre enables us to recognize a sound simply by hearing it, that it is a human voice. And if so, and so it is in same thing as in singing. Even while talking, we can very well understand who is talking. Even if we don't see that person, we can quickly relate as to who that person is speaking. Similarly, when an instrument is played, we can say simply by hearing its sound as to what particular instrument is being played. We can identify very easily by listening to a sound of sitar from a violin, from a mandolin, to a guitar, and to flute. We can easily understand and differentiate between the sounds of these instruments. It is because of this property of sound that a blind man is able to recognize the sounds of different instruments or the voices of different persons simply by hearing their sounds or voices. Therefore, timbre indicates that the sound which is being produced is a human voice, or it belongs to some instruments such as violin, sitar, or the tabla. So it is because of this property of sound, timbre, is why we understand and why we can say that different instruments have different sounds. I hope this quality of timbre and pitch and intensity is clear to you. These are very important properties of nad. And two types of nad we learned today. One is anahat nad and second is ahat nad. Ahat nad is what we can hear very clearly without much effort, which exists very clearly and distinctly. Anahat nad is something which is there but cannot be heard unless you make an effort to listen to it. Now we come to another very important term or concept in Indian classical music, which is called as the Shruti. The term Shruti is a Sanskrit word. It is derived from the root shru, which means to hear. And Shruti means that which can be heard. Our writers on music have defined Shruti in a very simple way. Shruyate iti Shruti. That means that which can be heard is called a Shruti. Which means any sound capable of being heard is called a Shruti. This definition of Shruti seems to be very simple. But from the musical point of view, it is not possible to give such a wide connotation to the word Shruti, because music is concerned with that sound alone which is capable of being used in music and not any kind of sound. Besides, the term Shruti connotes that sound which can be distinctly identified by the ear. So we will have to restrict the meaning of Shruti to the above said two conditions. Therefore, in order to understand the correct definition of Shruti, the following properties should be remembered. 1. Sound which is capable of being used in music. Second is the sound which can be clearly heard and sound which can be distinctly identified by the ear. So how is Shruti different from Swar? Swar, we did learn about Swar in the last class. So how is Shruti different? That we'll see. But the properties of Shruti which are to be remembered are sound which is capable of being used in music. It can only be a sound which can be used in music. Then only it can be called as Shruti. Because there are many other sounds which exist in the world, but we cannot use them in music. They cannot be called as Shrutis. So it has to be a musical sound, and then only it can be called as a Shruti. Then the second property is also that it has to be clearly heard. It cannot be anahatnad, which is not clearly heard and which has to be made an effort to listen to, and it exists but it cannot be heard unless we make an effort to. It cannot be that kind of a sound. So that anahatnad cannot be a Shruti. So Shruti is a sound which can be clearly heard. And the third important property is that the sound which can be distinctly identified by the ear. It has to be clearly identified that this is Shruti, a particular swara, and these are the 2-3 Shrutis, different Shrutis of the same swar. It has to be clearly identified by the human ear. Now the definition of Shruti, we'll see what the definition of Shruti is. Shruti is capable of being used in music and which can be distinctly identified by the ear is called as the Shruti. In other words, musical sounds which can be heard and distinguished from the other are called Shrutis. So every distinct and audible musical sound is called as Shruti. So there is a Sanskrit definition given in Abhinav Ragamanjiri. So which means, there's a Sanskrit shlok which defines Shruti. It means that the sound which is capable of being used in music and which can be distinctly identified by the ear is called as Shruti. So even Abhinav Ragamanjiri, which is one of the very important texts in ancient time, from the ancient times, also has given this as the correct definition of Shruti. As a matter of fact, both Shruti and Swara are musical sounds capable of being heard. The distinction between the two is something like that which exists between the snake and its coil, or between gold and the ornaments made out of it. Okay. All Shrutis are capable of being used as Swaras in various Ragas. The Shrutis that are actually used in a particular rag become Swar for that rag, and those that are not used in that rag remain Shrutis only. Swaras or notes are musical sounds at large intervals, while Shrutis are musical sounds at very small intervals between two consecutive notes and are known as microtones. Okay, so so all the Shrutis are Swaras. So the Shrutis which are used in various rags become Swaras for that rag. And the other Shrutis which are not used in a particular rag, they remain as Shrutis. Okay, so they have a very close connection, Shrutis and Swaras, with each other. Now let's come to rag. Rag or ragam. So rag is the term called in the North India, and ragam is the term called in Southern India. Both the terms come from Sanskrit, meaning color or passion. In the classical music of India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, so classical music that comes in India, Bangladesh and Pakistan, a melodic framework for improvisation and composition. Raga is based on a scale with a given set of notes, a typical order in which they appear in melodies and characteristic musical motifs. The basic components of a raga can be written down in the form of a scale, in some cases differing in ascent and descent. By using only these notes, by emphasizing certain degrees of the scale, and by going from note to note in ways characteristic to the raga, the performer sets out to create a mood or atmosphere that is unique to the raga in question. There are several hundred ragas in present use, and thousands are possible in theory. To South Asian musicians, raga is the most important concept in music making. And the classification of ragas play a major role in Indian music theory. In North India, ragas are classified according to such characteristics as mood, season, time, and in the southern India, ragas are grouped by the technical traits of their scales. The two systems may use different names for similar ragas or the same name for different ragas. Traditionally, ragas were associated with specific times of day and seasons of the year. And they were thought to have supernatural effects, such as bringing rain or causing fire. Like there is a very well-known saying that when Malhar is sung, then it starts raining. And when Rag Deepak is sung, then there is fire or there is a lot of heat that is caused by that rag. So these are some stories that are have become famous over the years. But these are some of the musical associations seasonal associations we can say that are there, that are maintained by certain musicians and they exist. While some of the seasonal associations are maintained by certain musicians, these restrictions are largely ignored in modern concert life, as most public performances take place in the evening and are concentrated in the cooler parts of the year. Nevertheless, in program notes or verbal introductions, musicians often refer to the traditional associations of time and season. A raga performance typically lasts for half an hour or more. It may be entirely improvised, or it may combine improvisation with a memorized composition that also uses only the stipulated tones of the given raga. Usually a rag performance goes on for half an hour to an hour or even beyond that. So it depends on the depth of the artist, how long he or she is able to improvise a particular rag. It also has a part of, it's a combination of memorized composition and then the improvisation, which is sung during the improvisation of the rag. Then comes the concept of tal. So tal is also called as beat in the Western music. Tal is very important in Indian classical music, just as swara is. Only thing is swara is not man-made, swara is natural, whereas tal is man-made. Tal is man-made. People make tal out of various beats, 15 beats, 16 beats, 7 beats, 9 beats, 10 beats. Some gharanas in Indian classical music present a Swara Pradhan Gaiki. Importance to Sur. The Swara Pradhan Gaiki is the Gaiki which is made by giving importance to Swar. And some present Tala Pradhan Gaiki, which is given as which is a Gaiki with importance to Tal or beat. Indian classical music must have three instruments along with the vocalist: the tanpura or the tambura, tabla, and the harmonium, which is also called as the peti in Marathi. So harmonium earlier used to be, harmonium was later replaced. Earlier it used to be either sarangi or violin. In this section, we will be looking at like how different compositions are set to different talas. The tal consists of different number of beats, starting from 6 beats, going up to 16 usually. We've seen there are also other tals with different number of beats, but these are most commonly used ones from 6 to 16. But before going on to the details of the tal, there are certain concepts in tal which are important to discuss, and then it will be easier for you to understand the concept of tal. So what are these certain other concepts? Kanda. Kanda is a very important concept in tal. So each interval between the bars is called the Kanda. So for example, there's a tal of 16 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1 is how it goes. And dha din din dha din din dha tin tin ta din din dha. So dha din din is the first khanda, dha din din is the second khanda, dha tin tin is the third khanda, and ta din din is the fourth khanda. So these are the intervals between the bars, and the tal is usually divided in these khandas. So for teen tal, there are 4 khandas of 4 matras each. In dadra, for example, there are 2 khandas of 3 matras each. In jhap tal, there are 4 khandas of 2, 3, 2, 3 matras. Okay, so there are different tals with different number of khandas in each tal. Then comes the concept of sam, which is the first beat of the tal, first matra of the tal. It is shown by a cross below the beat. So a sam also is a very important term in tal. Then comes the khali. So khali is usually the beat in the middle of the tal, and it is marked by a 0 below the beat. Then comes the tali or the clap. The tali or the clap is the starting of each khanda other than the sam, which is the first matra, and khali is shown by starting of each khanda other than sam and khali is shown by tali. Sam is taken as the first tali. The first clap is usually the sam, and the next talis are numbered and shown hence from 2 onwards. So there are different tals which have talis on different numbers, and there are also other matras which are shown with fingers like this. So for example, tal tin tal is shown dha dhin dhin dha, dha dhin dhin dha tin tin ta dhin dhin dha. So in this, it is a mixture of tali and khali and fingers. Okay. So the most commonly used different types of tals are the tal teen tal, tal keherwa, tal jhap tal, tal dadra, sautal, tal ada sautal, and tal jhumra, and tal tilwada, rupak are usually the very commonly used tals. Some is taken as the first thali, and the next thalis are numbered. If the words are grouped together, it is considered as single beat. For example, dha dhin, tirakit. For example, dhin, dhin, dhage, tirakit. So in the first two beats, dhin, dhin. There's only one beat per matra. But in the third and the fourth matra, you will see dhin, dhin, dhage. So there are two bowls in one matra. So it is together considered to be a one matra. Dhage, tirakita. So in the fourth matra, there is tirakita. Four bowls in one matra. So it is considered to be as one single matra. There are various other tals also apart from the tals that I just told you. Those are Dhumali, Surfakta, then Sul, Sul tal, Dhamar tal, Adha Tin tal. There are also these tals that are commonly used. Okay. We will discuss Thaat in the next class. Today we will discuss after Tal, we will discuss Alankar. So Alankar is to make the rag rendering more beautiful and varied, different ornamental patterns are used. Okay, it cannot be just plain swar which we are singing. There are different modulations needed in singing and different ornamentations which are needed to make rag rendering more beautiful. And Alankar precisely do that. So Alankar literally means ornaments or adorations. Alankar, if we see in the normal context, they mean ornaments, isn't it? And ornaments are beautiful to look at. They are very nicely made with very, very beautiful designs. And it's a sight to watch, ornaments. So the same meaning is also there in the music, Indian classical music term. When we say Alankar, its function, its purpose is to make the rag rendering more beautiful. So Alankar literally means ornaments or adorations. So specific melodic presentation in succession in which a pattern is followed is called Alankar. For example, Sare Ga, Re Ga Ma, Ga Ma Pa, Ma Pa Dha, Pa Dha Ni, Dha Ni Sa. This phrase is part of an Alankar in which three notes in succession are used at each time. Sa, sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, da, ni, sa. In which, in this Alankar, we followed a pattern of three swaras in succession, one after the other. So there is a particular design to it. We are not breaking that design. So this particular design is called an Alankar. There are many such Alankars, thousands of it we can make. But the important is that we have to follow a design pattern in each Alankar. So this phrase is a part of an Alankar in which three notes in succession are used at each time. There can be other Alankars also like Sa, Ga, Re, Ma, Ga, Pa, Ma, Dha, Pa, Ni, Dha, Sa. Okay, so there is Sa, Ga, Re, Ma, Ga, Pa, Ma, Dha, Pa, Ni, Dha, Sa, in which again there is a particular design which is followed. Sare, sare, ga, sare, sare, ga. So it is a design of 5 notes. Sare, sare, ga, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, pa, dha, ni, da, ni, sa. So again, this is a different design, but we're following it throughout. from the beginning. Sa, sa re, re ga, ga ma pa da, da ni sa. So whatever design you follow, you have to follow the design. Sagare sare magare ga pa maga madha pa ma pa ni da pa da sa ni dha ni re sa ni sagare sa. Again, a different design. So these are various alankars. There are many alankars that we can do. It is up to our imagination, and there are different alankars that can be made in different ragas also. So we'll stop here for today. In the next class, we'll continue with gamak. And so these are different alankars. Today we just saw about what is an alankar, but we will, in the next class, we will actually see what these alankars are, what are the different types of alankar that we have, and also learn about thought, which is a big chapter, and also a few more other concepts, which we will continue with. Thank you.